All right. So I'm not seeing this. Yep, there we go. It's live on YouTube. So we're back.
Okay.
All right, cool. So let me try to pull in the News 12 feed.
Okay.
All right. Well, that looks better. That looks like we're kind of back to where we were.
Yes.
All right. Keep it really simple. So, with News 12 running in the background, Peter, we can't go wrong. This is looking good. It's looking good on YouTube. I think we're okay. So we're okay for the time being. So yeah, Peter, what do you, this is it was kind of a new thing for me when we first started podcasting to talk about Israel. That was new. Ignore that message. It's not actually happening. You sound fine.
Okay.
And that is something I personally had to get used to, and it was a lesson for me. Not more than a lesson. It was like a learning experience because people talk about Israel, but I really never covered it as like something that I blogged about or vlogged about before. And then it got serious. We started that podcast at the beginning of the late, maybe the very end of September, I think, is when the radio station closed. And then all of a
Yes.
sudden, it was the biggest story in the world for months and months and to this day. So I had to get comfortable very quickly talking about it. But I can tell you that I don't think I ever felt as stressed out on camera, on microphone, as when we were talking to the rabbi from Pelham and
Yes.
Nadia. What was her name? Not Nadia.
Nada.
Yeah. So the Palestinian woman,
Kadir or Kadir.
not
Yeah.
not a Cotter, who lives in
Kadir. Yeah.
Westchester. It was just unbelievable because these are very personal experiences. These are very emotional. But I guess that broke me in because, and it got me ready for this congressional race because this race has been it's nonstop talk about Zionism and racism and Israel and Zionism and is Zionism racism and it's just an endless stream of subtopics that stem from that. And at the end of the day, I mean, I will tell you, I got comfortable talking about it. And when I first started, I thought this Latimer Bowman race is just going to be, it's going to end up being like a big old referendum on Israel. And I've seen a lot of editorials about that topic, and there is some truth in that, but I don't think that ended up being the whole story. I think it actually ended up being a referendum on
Personalities.
fitness for being a elected legislator. I
Which comes down to
yeah,
personalities. They're very, very different in how they comport themselves, in
right.
what they say, more importantly, how they say it. And they are completely contrasted. One wears a suit almost all the time. Even when he's not wearing a suit, he looks like he should be wearing a suit. That's Latimer. And Bowman, who's a shoot from the hip guy, who likes to establish his Bronx bona fides and his Yonkers bona fides in order to elicit responses from people he's trying to reach and intimidate those who he doesn't want to reach, but he wants to reach them in a different way. He's always not going to vote for them, but he wants them to be afraid of them.
Well, we had
afraid of
an
him.
opportunity. We had an opportunity to interview both these guys
Yes, we did.
a couple times, and we interviewed Bowman in 2020 at least
Yes.
once, and then we interviewed him again this year. We did not interview him in the 2020 cycle. We attempted, we invited him, but he didn't come to the show. But this time in 2024, he did. And, you know, you and I have discussed this before. I think that this is a guy who is not going away, regardless of what happens tonight.
No.
And that, you know, he has bona fides. They're just not this same kind of bona fides as George Latimer. And they can't be. They're not the same person. But I think that what you're seeing here is I thought it was interesting what you said to me earlier, which is like, what do you think he might do next? I think
Well,
in the
yes.
answer to that question, that is very revealing. What do you think he might do next, Peter, if he loses tonight?
Well, if he loses, all indications are he's going to lose, but you never know. His best way back into the fray is not to run for anything in Westchester County that involves Westchester County. I know he lives in Yonkers now and he'd have to move to the Bronx, but I don't think that's such a big leap for him. They're right next to one another. And I can see him running for city council. And I see him, depending who he'd be running against, with a good chance to win. He's got name recognition now, which he didn't have before. And you and I, when we were speaking before, made the argument that now he's got a bully pulpit. He didn't have one before. People didn't know much of anything about him, even during the 4 years he's been in Congress. The only thing they know about him from the past year is that he pulled a fire alarm in Congress. But now he has been on stations all over the world, if you think about it. CNN
Right.
goes all over the world. And he's got name recognition. A city council job would give him the pulpit that he wants to reach New York City voters. And if he does that, he could run for anything in New York City. He could run for state senate. But I think he's going to run for a city job, a city slot in the world of politics. That's my perspective, because I don't think he wants to wait around 2 years for George Latimer to turn 2 years older and then figure things out from there. Because if Latimer does a good job, he's not going to lose. He's never lost a race. He's never lost anything he's ever run for.
So back to Bowman for a second. I think you're onto something that like there's some elected position that might be appropriate, but I think he'll come back a little different because I think that part of what his presentation and maybe this has actually been a very successful run for Jamal Bowman.
Even if he loses.
Even if he loses. Yes, and I'll tell you why. Because maybe he got what he individually wanted out of being a member of Congress, which is visibility, notoriety, name brand recognition, a platform that many people agree with and like. Now,
I'm
don't
not
like
sure
all
I
of
agree
it.
with the
Yeah.
word many, but some.
Well, he got elected twice.
Yeah, he did.
And he had in just reading the numbers in Lohud in 2020 when he ran against Elliot Engel, it was a very substantial. He trounced them. I think it was an 8-point victory, maybe more.
Well, you have to
So
remember that the people who were running Elliott's campaign in 2020 were in their 80s,
yes, that is certainly part of the story. But
as was he.
so I think Peter, what we're seeing here, like the sum total of it is that that playbook that has been and will continue to be very successful for Justice Democrats, for the squad, whatever you want to call that group, is if you can run against an incumbent or non-incumbent who doesn't really have genuine roots in the community and has somehow become disconnected or didn't have those roots in the first place, and you can establish those relationships and establish that coalition very rapidly, either through a kind of a labor base or a lower middle class appeal or a populist appeal or whatever it is, you can use the same tools as the rich guys and be very, very successful. That is what they have done. They were very, very good at it. But what I think we're going to find out tonight is that if you're opposing someone who is well connected in multiple communities, that has a very broad based coalition, yeah, you don't want to go up against that guy with a big pile of money from outside the district
Well,
because
here's
that
my
playbook
take.
might not work as well.
Here's my take on this. I agree with some of what you said, but not all of what you said, and this is why. As you know, because we spoke earlier, I've been speaking to some Democratic political wonks in Westchester who have said to me that they expect Latimer to win between 15 points and 18 points. And their take is, if Bowman loses by that kind of significant number, that will translate to all these other squad people to recognize that their message isn't resonating with enough people with their far left, their anti-Israel, in my mind, anti-Semitic messaging, and they're going to have to come more towards the center or else they're going to lose relevance. Now, that's not the case, as you said before, in Hamtramck. Tlaib will be in Congress as long as she wants to be, unless she gets caught up in something.
Because there's a different set of demographics. But if 9% of the voters are Jewish and Israel is a visible issue, and which it was not as visible an issue 4 years ago as it is right now because of this war. But that's not a guarantee either, because if the candidate had been a different guy, there might have been a very different result. And by that, I'm referring to George Latimer. If it had been like 2 years ago when Vedat Gashi ran, he couldn't really make a whole lot of noise out of the whole thing. If he had been the candidate this time, I think you're on mute, Peter.
Gashi was not a great candidate because he's very stiff. He's not very glib. It's very difficult for him to connect to some things. People said he had skeletons in his closet. They said he lived on the Upper West Side and not in Westchester. There were a whole lot of reasons why that never resonated. And I don't know if that's going to be the case in the future. I mean, let's think about it for a minute. Latimer is he 72? Is that his age? I think he's 72. So let's say he runs in 26 and then again in 28. By 30, he's going to be 80 years old. He's not going to be, or actually, it's not this, it's 26, 28, 30. But he'll be 80 years old.
He's 70. He's 70.
Okay, 70. So he'll be 78 years old.
Right.
Sorry about getting the age wrong. I remembered it wrong. Sorry. But I don't know that Bowman's going to wait around to find out every 2 years if he's going to get his head smacked. Mm-hmm. So Bowman has to find a different way to resonate with voters in a different race.
So there's a couple of other words that I want to introduce, which is Bowman's presence seems to me like a revolutionary presence. In other words, he wants to tackle big, broad social issues. He wants to be a revolutionary. He wants to stand on stage and pound the lectern and kind of be that guy.
Or strut around the stage without a lectern.
Yeah, I mean, you saw some of the footage from this weekend. So that
sure
okay,
did.
I'm not really editorializing on whether that's good or bad, but if you want to be that guy, I think that's a little different than when you get elected. You are the government at that point. When like I even remember being on the school board. Before I was on the school board, I had a blog where I used to talk about all the terrible things that the school board was doing. But then when I actually got elected to the school board, I couldn't carry on exactly like that anymore because I represented the school board and anything I said was a school board position. So I think there comes a point where you have to kind of maybe the word is evolve, maybe the word is alter, maybe the word is modulate. I don't know exactly what word I'm looking for, but you have to
I
go
think I
from
think you have to learn to pivot.
yeah, you have to somehow go from being that one kind of leader to being a different kind of leader in order to be effective. It just is, and I've read so many editorials, and this topic constantly comes up about and let's open up the Pandora's box and talk about the $14 million in outside money that came into this race to fight against Bowman on behalf of primarily pro-Israel voters, not necessarily APAC money, but outside money in the form of PACs like UDP and others, which I saved a lot of that postal mail that I received. I think the commentary there is that is also, in fairness to Bowman, not healthy for the democratic process. It's the same set of tools that everybody has access to, but for an outside group to have an unlimited ability to spend without the authorization of the candidate themselves, in my opinion, is a perversion of the election process.
Well,
But
wait till what happens in a few years. You and I were talking about this earlier this afternoon about unlimited money, and I mentioned to you that if you see what's going on in Europe, a lot of people from the Middle East have moved into Europe, and over time, they have gotten themselves elected to positions in government, and they're getting funded by these oil-rich countries. So when we get to that, this is a microcosm, a small skirmish compared to what the future is going to bring when you have all this Gulf money coming in and changing elections. I mean, the reasons why these universities were not coming down hard on the protesters is because some of these colleges like Columbia, Northwestern, Harvard, MIT get hundreds of millions of dollars from countries like Qatar. And they are going to be
I
asserting
hear you.
themselves into politics for decades to come, if not forever.
So let's isolate it to the campaigns, right? So it's Citizens United basically said, I'm paraphrasing, but it basically said that money can slosh around these campaigns and corporations can vote through their pocketbook like people without really a heck of a lot of restriction. Now, a PAC does have to register itself with the Federal Election Commission. I think there are I think there are restrictions on international money coming into these PACs. There's some reporting restrictions on the whole thing, but basically, it's an unlimited supply of money for the party that can get their hands on it, and I think it does have a perverse effect. If you look at this particular race, Bowman versus Latimer, minus the outside money, it was kind of sort of matched. Now George had a little more than Bowman, but it was maybe 25% more. It wasn't like 85% more or 300% more.
Right.
What did differ is where the money came from. And the overwhelming majority of Latimer's money came from inside the district and Bowman from outside the district, small contributions across the United States.
Right.
So I'm one thought that's been floating around my head this whole time, and then I have some interesting information to share with you that I just got online, is that I don't think that this race, outside of that outside money, and I don't know, I kind of feel like the UDP money and the MDFI or whatever that outside organization, I think they overdid it. I think they just shot their wad and just over rotated so outrageously that their message began to cancel itself out. I think that this was a reasonably well matched race, and what you're seeing in what I think we're going to see tonight, this is just my prediction, is probably like a 7 or 8 point victory by Latimer that reflects the most foundational thing in politics, which is alignment and connection with people inside the district. I think that's where we are. Now, did the money help him tell the story? Of course it did. but I don't think he necessarily needed $14 million in outside money to help him tell that story. I think he had enough on his own, and this is just my 2 cents. I think maybe he over rotated a little bit with respect to APAC. Now I have some information that just came in. So a couple people who are on the Red Blue Talkers group here. Hope said she was voter number. Get this. Hope was voter number 113 at District 64. That's in Mount Vernon on East Lincoln Avenue, and 7 more people came in after her. So that's one polling place.
It's not a
In
lot.
these are low numbers. And then Cynthia said, I was number 80 at the time of 4 p.m. at Graham Elementary School. So I know that polling place, and it's a super busy place. 80 people is nothing. I mean, more people vote in a school board election. It suggests to me, it's not conclusive, but it suggests to me that there are meaningful numbers of people who are simply staying home.
Tired. They're tired of it.
They're staying home. They're staying. They had enough. They didn't like it, and they're staying home.
Hmm.
I think that might be
I voted.
what's going on.
I voted the first day the polls opened in Greenberg, and we got there within the first hour and a half, 2 hours of it being open.
Right.
And there were plenty of people who voted before us. There were like 50 or 60 before we even put our paperwork in. So I think it depends where you were, whether people were voting or not. And I also wonder in those 2 districts that you described, whether those people, those locations with a higher voter turnout, I would think that they would have helped Bowman more than Latimer.
Yes. Without we well that so let's look at that, Peter. If you believe that those districts would tend to cut toward Bowman if the numbers were higher, then you
Yes.
have to believe that African American voters in Mount Vernon had a propensity to support an African American incumbent congressman, which I think is a reasonable assertion. I've asserted that since the very beginning. I think
And
there was
yet they haven't shown, and at least in those 2 districts, they didn't show up.
so if the numbers are low, it would suggest that either there was a conflict because there was some connection to George Latimer, or maybe voters there saw something that wasn't what they were looking for in the candidacy of Jamal Bowman.
That's my sense too,
We
obviously.
won't know with certainty, and I think it's too early to say anything conclusive, but
Absolutely.
it's certainly some interesting anecdotal information here.
Well, let's change gears for a moment here. We also
Yeah.
have a
No,
district
no, no.
attorney's race.
I got one more for you.
Go
So
ahead.
Hope is telling me. So I believe Hope is a Democratic district leader in Mount Vernon.
Okay.
And if you've spent any time around Mount Vernon, on election night, it's sort of a traditional place to hang out is the Mount Vernon Democratic headquarters. There's a Democratic City Committee headquarters there.
Okay.
It is a kind of a dusty big old room, wood panel kind of a place that looks like it hasn't seen any sort of update since
The
the
70s.
maybe the Carter administration.
Yeah.
And but Hope is reporting that there's only 7 people at headquarters right now.
And that's a stronghold for Bowman.
That it certainly should be, but just based on the fact that he's the incumbent congressman.
Right.
That alone ought to get 30, 40 people into the room, and I've been in that room when there were 200.
Are you still sticking
election.
with your 7 or 8 point loss after these revelations to you?
Let's just say I've gotten more confident in my 7 point margin.
More confident.
and it will certainly get to 7, and it could go higher.
Okay.
But I think it's going to be 15. No, I don't, and I'll tell you why. Because there are some rules of gravity that still apply. incumbency in the United States Congress is 92%. And the only thing that Bowman did, it's not the fire alarm, it's not the 9/11 conspiracy theories that preceded his time in Congress. The only thing that he did was stand up and vocally advocate for a complete and total ceasefire very early in the Israeli Palestinian conflict. And I don't necessarily agree with that position, and I also don't think it was the position of the United States of America. So it's odd to me that he would take on that role in the middle of an election campaign. It's odd to me that he would take on that visible position on that topic. And it also doesn't align with the Jamal Bowman of 2022 or 2020, for that matter. But apart from that, he hasn't done anything terribly, terribly wrong. And there are plenty of people, and not necessarily amongst them, who feel that a statement in support of the innocent people lost in Palestine is a valid sentiment. So
Listen, I can't. I also agree with a complete ceasefire, but the delivery of that information matters. It's not just feeling that way; it's how you present it. And Jamal Bowman is a very animated guy, and I'm being kind here. And he sounded very anti-Israel, not just pro-ceasefire, but anti-Israel and how he's doing things. And let's just break this down a little bit more. We've had people on our show who tried to, once he got into office, to spend some time with him, to get to know him, and for Bowman to get to know them. And he completely rejected these people. Now, if you're going to run for office in Westchester County, isn't it smart to get along with people in White Plains? I mean, White Plains is a very diverse community.
You're telling the Justin Brash story. He told it on
I
this
am.
show.
He did tell us that, yes.
4 or 5 weeks ago, he told that story on this show. And, my takeaway from that story was that it was probably a missed opportunity. I mean, we don't know exactly what happened in those conversations, but I think it was a missed opportunity on Bowman's part. And it underscores for me that there was some sort of, he peeled away a little bit from his earlier positions because
Right, he did.
The Jamal Bowman in 2022 had the support of J Street, which is a more liberal political action committee aligned with Israel. He did not have the support of the Democratic Socialists of America because he had apparently voted against the BDS policy in Congress at some point. So he was, just sort of an inch closer to the center. But then at some point, he takes a trip to Israel and he sees something, and it either it changed him individually or just changed him politically. I don't know exactly which. And the war, and that even before the war broke out, he comes back and he's got this. He has this positioning that has a thin patina of anti-Semitism. People begin to sense that, and it never quite got back in line. And
I'm not sure I agree with the thin patina. I think he lacquered it on. But that's me.
It didn't go well. It just didn't go well for him after that. And maybe that's who he's going to continue to be. I guess the broader question, the bigger question is, what is this going to mean for the squad if there's a 8, 10, 15 point loss tonight? What does this mean for
that's something that you and I spoke about earlier today, and I don't know if you agree with what I said, but I said what I did. What I basically said was, there are people who are supporting Latimer who thinks that he will win by between 15 and 18 points, and if he does, that's a signal to members of the squad and to left-leaning progressives that you need to go back a little bit towards the medium and not be so outrageous in your views and how you express them in order to be elected. And if he wins by less than that, if Latimer wins by less than 15%. I don't know why they picked 15, but what's the matter with 10? I think that's a good solid double-digit number. Then it opens up a lot of questions for what the future of the Democratic Party is. I threw something else out at you during our conversation before. What is to stop Jamal Bowman from becoming a Republican?
Well, nothing, but why would he do that? He would have to diametrically change his view on everything. Why would he do that?
Well, you said, but we just talked about the fact that he did that a lot from 20 to 2024. Who knows how these people are going to, I mean, by these people, I mean politicians, not black politicians. Who knows what politicians are willing to do to get themselves elected? Look at how the Republicans, some of them were mainstream Republicans, who are now flag-waving MAGA nuts. And they've totally changed how they view the country and how they vote and what they say. So what's to say that Jamal Bowman's not capable of doing that if he thinks it'll get him elected?
I think it's highly unlikely. I think that
Okay.
he is if nothing else, he is a true lefty, and I think he will remain committed to working class requirements and labor aligned issues and the squad. And yes, I think he will remain right in that pocket for a very long time.
Well, I don't know if that's the case, but I mean, mine's a far-fetched concept, but we're living in a world of far-fetched concepts.
So we have a little bit of new information here from Tara Rosenblum. Let me try to bring this up. Hang on one second here. Hang on a second. This is the miracle of live broadcasting.
A report just came out that Trump may ditch the first debate for Thursday, scheduled for Thursday.
Really?
That's what it said.
All right, here we go.
Well, I have some stuff from the early numbers.
What do you got?
20. Right now, Latimer is up 10%, 1,002 versus 807. The DA, Cacace is beating Wagstaff pretty handily, 54 to 36%. I have that from the Westchester.gov, westchestergov.com. What did Tara have?
We're going to stop sharing there. I'm going to show you what she's got. Let's see here. And apparently Ken Jenkins is talking too. Let me see if I can share that screen.
From Westchester. So we still have to wait for those numbers to trickle in from the Bronx. But certainly, if you're a supporter of George Latimer, you like the way those numbers are sounding right now. A more than 2-to-1 advantage for the early voting numbers here in Westchester County. I'm here live at his primary night watch party, and we'll have more results for you soon.
All right, let's watch the beginning of it.
All right, everyone, the polls are now closed, and we already have our first numbers coming in the bitterly contested race for the 16th Democratic congressional primary. I'm joined now by the Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins, hot off the press. Mr. Jenkins, what numbers can you share with us?
So the early vote numbers for Westchester, and it's just Westchester, 12,745, 12,724 for Latimer, 5,745 for Bowman, and that's the early vote number.
Coming in from Westchester, so we still have to wait for those numbers to trickle in from the Bronx, but certainly if you're a supporter of George Latimer, you like the way those numbers are sounding right now. A more than 2-to-1 advantage for the early voting numbers here in Westchester County. I'm here live at his primary night watch party, and we'll have more results for you soon.
He can't make that up in the Bronx. It's over.
It is. He may get between. Hey, Latimer may win by more than 15%.
Yeah, it's going to be more than 50% because he can't make that up in the Bronx. It's like, and I don't think he can make it up on election day if the numbers are trickling in like we think they are in Mount Vernon.
No, he's dead in Mount Vernon right now.
If that's so, then yeah, there's going to be it's going to be pretty significant. So we'll keep our eye out on other reports from
I mean, some of the larger villages, and I don't know what Peekskill's doing. I'm pretty sure that White Plains, it may not be 2-1, but I'm pretty sure White Plains voters are going to be strongly in Latimer's pocket. But I can't be 100% positive of that. But I do speak to the politicians from
then
where I live,
let's-
which is in White Plains.
say it's more than 15%. Let's take that, and what does that mean for the other squad members? Maybe nothing.
Well, you know what? AOC is going to win by big numbers. Our third wheel, Ardina Seward, who hasn't been able to come on the show to this point, thinks that her opponent has a chance.
Marty Dolan.
Marty
Dolan.
Dolan.
We also interviewed.
Yeah, and he was a good interview.
Right.
But I don't think he has a chance. Based on just everything I've read. You're not reading very much about him except in the New York Post.
So, if anything, I think maybe Marty Dolan did AOC a favor by giving her a billionaire to run against.
Yes.
Without having to worry about getting beat or losing any votes.
I think that's true. What it means for the squad, for Tlaib, it doesn't mean anything. But
I don't think, if I be candid with you, Peter, I don't think it means anything for AOC. And
It
I'll
doesn't.
tell you why. I'll tell you why. She's 8 million followers on social media.
right.
She's loved in her district. And,
Yes, she is.
And they do a tremendous amount of ground campaign work in her district. She uses all the conventional tools of electioneering to be a very popular person in her district. She was successful in the first place because she beat Joe Crowley, who was the definition of an incumbent disconnected from the people within the district.
Joe had no personality at all. I used to deal with him when I was in the news business in New York, with both Channel 9 and the New York Post.
If I recall correctly, Peter, he was the chair of the Democratic Party.
Doesn't say much for the Democratic Party.
And he was a Congress member from that area. And no one ever saw him. He didn't spend time in the district.
No.
He was one of these guys, and there are others in Congress.
Sean Maloney was that way in northern Westchester.
And the leader of the DCCC, and he still lost. So what does that tell you? That tells you that gravity still applies. You have to know the people in your district. You have to, and that could come from growing up there, like George Latimer, or it could come from being a leader there for a very long time, or it could come from doing a lot of legwork like AOC and establishing those relationships and making connections with labor and making connections with large blocks of people who are interested in what you are offering. And I think that's the gravity, the basic laws of physics that weren't really working for the second term of Jamal Bowman. That
Not at all.
Doesn't mean he can't come back. And I'll come back to what I said earlier. I think that maybe what he wanted out of Congress was to become famous, and then use that fame as a platform for social change. And he could very well be successful with that.
In New York City,
Yeah. Yep.
not in Westchester. He spit the bit in Westchester, and I don't see. George Latimer is not going to, quote, lose elections based on his voting record, his personality, or what he says. If George Latimer loses a race, it's going to be because he was outworked. And as far as you and I know, George Latimer has never been outworked. I mean, this guy works 365 days a year, it seems. And he resonates with people. He just does.
I'm just trying to see how much money was spent on this race. There was a good article on Low HUD.
Wasn't it like $23 million or something like that?
It was. I think it got up a little higher than that. I think it was either 26 or 28 million
Okay.
altogether.
But it was in the 20s. It was the most expensive primary race in the history of the United States, from what I read in a couple of different places. So that's a lot. But
Yeah.
we have to say something about the DA's race.
Please.
And that was kind of the problem with that race is that Mirza attacked Cacace, which raised her Q because a lot of Democrats wanted her to win because they didn't like Mirza. And Wagstaff just fell by the wayside. I think that he would have been a great district attorney. I really do. And the first time I got to find out really about what he thinks and how he thinks and how he expresses himself was a few days ago when the Journal News finally ran an article comparing their positions, and she sounded like a program politician, and he sounded like a district attorney. And if he loses, and all indications are he's not going to win, that's a shame, because he would have been, if he had a better organization, if he was able to raise more money, he really had a chance to do something. And if he doesn't win tonight, I hope he finds a way to run again in the future, because I don't know that Cacace is going to be much.
Prior to 5 minutes ago, my theory was that Bowman, win, lose, or draw, would drag a lot of votes in for Wagstaff.
Do you still feel that way?
No, I don't, because now I'm starting to think if all of the, if 100% of the Westchester early voting is 19,000 votes, and 13,000 of them went to Latimer, it suggests to me that a significant number of African American voters stayed home, and I think that will hurt. I think that will hurt Wagstaff without a doubt.
Now let's turn. So I don't know where else you want to go with this, but those were the two big races, and district attorney's race was not covered by the media much at all. They really spit the bit.
Yeah, I'm looking. There weren't that many articles in Lowhut, and there was one that I just read. I think it was on my phone. Hold on a second here. Somebody's saying Cacace is off to a strong start. AJ is reporting.
No surprise. No surprise.
AJ is reporting. So let's see. I've got a screenshot here. Unofficial tally of election results. And these election results would reflect today's vote, not the early voting. Early voting is everything. So Jamal Bowman, 3,000 votes. George Latimer, 4,400 votes. Total of 7,400 votes. 59% Latimer. Yeah, he's about got an 18% margin there.
Which is exactly what one of the people who we both know predicted it would be that.
Okay, that's 104 districts out of 636 reporting, 16%. But still, this is a pretty significant night for these guys.
Right.
So Jamal Bowman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Ayanna Presley were in Hartley Park in Mount Vernon over the weekend. And I guess it didn't do a heck of a lot.
Did you notice, though, at Jamal Bowman's rally in the South Bronx over the weekend that AOC did not show up? She was scheduled to appear but did not show up.
She appeared. I saw her speech at St. Mary's Park.
Are you sure? I read somewhere that she skipped one and said she had to go do her own political stuff.
Well, if she skipped an other event, I don't know, but I for sure saw her speak on YouTube in St. Mary's Park in the South Bronx this weekend at the same rally that Jamal Bowman spoke at.
I must be referring to a different rally that Bowman
Different event, probably different event.
Yes.
So let's talk about the staggering amount of money. So let's say it was $26 million altogether that was spent on this race.
On a primary.
$26 million, and there's 700,000 people in the district. So some quick arithmetic. That's $37 for every single resident of the district.
Not voters, resident.
So how many primary voters do you think you are? Do you think there are? Maybe 40,000 on the outside?
On the outside, yeah.
Okay, so let's take 26 million and divide it by 40,000. That's $650 for every single primary voter.
That's a lot.
That's
That's a
staggering.
lot of money.
That's staggering. That's like Mike Bloomberg level money. More. It's probably more than Bloomberg spent on his race for mayor.
Yeah.
So that's problematic. But now let's subtract the 14 million from the 28. So let's suppose it's 14 million altogether. $14 million of actual candidate money, not spent by an outside group. Let's say that was a total of 26 minus 14. 26
12.
minus 14 is 12 million. So let's say $12 million of real money was spent on 40,000 votes.
Wow.
It's $300 per vote. I don't know. What did that $300 buy, Peter?
Not much.
It bought this pile of mail.
Not just the mail, all the phone, all the robot calls.
And the television.
Oh, and the television commercials.
So by the way, here's the Wagstaff did have some decent mailers,
Yeah.
right? I got some of this stuff.
Wagstaff, I wish he had run a better campaign or had more money or whatever it took, because I still believe that that's the guy I would want to be the district attorney, and he's not going to be now.
Whatever happened to this guy?
He dropped out
Yeah. How come?
because he saw the handwriting on the wall, I guess.
And we think this is who's going to win?
Yeah, that's what the pundits are saying, yes.
Okay. So there was a lot of mail like this, a lot of stuff like this, right? Vote for Jamal Bowman. This particular one was paid for by Bowman for Congress, right? So this is candidate mail. But then we move a little further down the stack and we have anti-George Latimer messaging that was paid for by the WFP National PAC, Working Family Party.
Well, that's
Then,
interesting.
Then there was anti-Bowman mail by the handful here. So this mail came from, does it even say? Yes. United Democracy Project paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee, UDP.
Have you ever noticed a more fractious primary in New York State or in Westchester County than this one?
No, not in this area. No, I have not seen it. And so here's another one called DMFI PAC. So this is the mailer that Bowman was complaining they made him look darker. And they did.
They did. Yeah.
Right? And the other side is cleverly cued to use the same colors as George Latimer's own mailers, but this is not a George Latimer mailer. This is an anti-Bowman mailer that was sent out by DMFI PAC. And I don't recall ever seeing mail that had the Hebrew flag, the Jewish flag on it. I don't remember ever seeing that before. Jamal Bowman condemned Israel's founding as a catastrophe, but that was just the beginning. So this was sent out by United Democracy Project. And the United Democracy Project, more DMFI. I mean, Peter, look at this stuff.
Massive. I never looked at any of them.
So here's my favorite one. Okay, this is a mailer in the shape of a fire alarm, and you pull the fire alarm down.
Oh, my wife showed me that one.
And it says Jamal Bowman's actions are alarming. He pulled a fire alarm. He voted against President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure bill, which I think that might have been a bad move. Doesn't get results and won't compromise. His radicalism hurt the mainstream Democratic agenda. And then it lists the facts. You know, The only thing I can say is this was paid for by NY16 Mainstream Voters Inc. of White Plains, New York. It's kind of like a little on the childish side.
Yes. By the way, no one's paid any attention to the District 17 vote. Frascone against Mondier Jones. They're very, very low numbers. It's not even worth mentioning. It's 13 voters so far, so that's not meaningful at all.
Do we think Mondare is a problem there?
Well, according to this, he has 10 votes to Frascone's 3, so no, but it's 13 votes. It's not exactly.
Right.
And he's running on WOR, not as Democrats.
Well, there you have it, Peter. I think that clip there from Tara Rosenblum kind of
Summed it all up.
That kind of ended it. I'm going to watch that again real quick, and then we're going to sign off.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Happy election night to you. My photographer, Alan, and I, we are stationed here at George Latimer's election night watch party. We are in White Plains, which is the county seat, the heart of Westchester County, and most notable for tonight's purposes, the heart of the 16th Congressional District. This primary matchup between George Latimer and the two-term incumbent, Jamal Bowman, easily the highest profile primary underway not only in New York State tonight, but the nation and the world is watching to see the results here tonight.
Stop
Bernie
that right
Sanders
now.
in
As of
Westchester
right,
County
as of
just
right
last
now,
weekend calling this.
As of right now, the race has tightened considerably. It's 55 to 45, and there's only a few thousand votes separating the two of them. It's 10% now, not 63 to 33%.
Oh, okay. Where'd you get that?
It's on live at News 12 right now.
Okay, hang on. Let me go get that.
So there's something going on there. And I just saw something about the Wagstaff Cacace, and it went to some other votes. So, but this is live on News 12, and I'm sure anybody who's watching us is going to at some point turn to News 12 because the Journal News is so far behind on anything and everything. Here, the election results are coming up right now. Latimer's got a 21,968 to 18,140. So that's 55 to 45%. Frascone and Mondier Jones, there's nothing. The results are meaningless right now. Shimsky is beating Abenante 62 to 38% with about little less than 4,000 people voting. Cacace is up 58 to 32%. Mirza, who's no longer running, was still on the ballot. He has 10% of the vote. So I don't know how meaningful any of this is at this point, but I don't like Abenante as a person, and I find him to be kind of sleazy. But he beat Shimsky the last time, so we'll see what happens tonight. Your thoughts?
We had Shimsky on the show. I think we had Abenante on the show at one point.
We did.
I think it might have still been on VOX. I don't remember. I remember you saying to him, "You don't remember me, but I remember you."
Yes, and he got very upset about that.
It really threw him off.
Because I told him where we met in Chappaqua on an election night.
Yeah, I met him at a farmer's market, and he gave me some COVID tests about 2 years ago.
I hope he was sober when he did that, because he wasn't sober in Chappaqua.
Wow.
And he acted very poorly that night. It was really disgusting, in my opinion.
So, what's your final prediction? We'll have to check back later. Do you think it's going to be end up at about 15% margin for? I
do.
Latimer?
I do. Although I could be wrong. It could be more. It could be less.
I don't see how it's much less if the early vote was 13-6.
And it doesn't. It also the vote we have now include those who voted early, or no?
No, my understanding is that when the Board of Elections reports data, they're reporting data from today.
So that means that, in all probability, there'll be more votes for Latimer than for Bowman on that note. So, are we going to announce something tonight about what's happening now with our show?
So we're wrapping up this series of 914 Wired, at least at least for now. I think it was an interesting episode for an experience for which, of course, I'm very grateful to you, Peter, and to Ardina, who couldn't be here tonight.
Right.
And I think that it was a transitional experience because it had been a radio show for many years, predated me by a long time, but I was on there for a few years toward the end, and then WVOX got sold. which is-
2010 until 2023.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable that an institution like WVOX would disappear, but it did. And even before it disappeared, the world had begun to change, and
Right.
podcasting kind of had over a arc of about 10 years really replaced a lot of radio programming, and particularly local programming. And the station got bought. All local programming was discontinued, all of it.
Yes.
And I believe now if you put on 1460, you're listening to Christian music and nothing else.
Yes, not something I'm very familiar with, Christian music. But
That's the
but
format of the
to
show.
anyone who's watching this, it's going to be the last of 914 Wired. But Charlie is going to be doing his own podcast about things that he's very expert on. And I look forward to seeing that grow. And maybe once in a while he might give me a ring up and see if he wants me to talk about some of the things or talk to what the people he's interviewing. If he wants me to, I'm more than happy to do that.
Peter, there's no question that will happen. I will always lean back on you for expertise and editorial depth and
lunches. And
and
lunches.
pizza and pizza. Yeah, which is the last thing I want to eat anymore. But it's irresistible, and you've managed to find the best places in Westchester and the Bronx to consume it. So
Thank you.
thank you for that. All right, that's it, everybody. 914 Wired. It ended up being a big race for George Latimer. We don't quite know yet what the DA's race has left in it, but we'll find out as the fullness of time unfolds before us. Thank you. everybody.
Shalom. Shalom, everybody.
Good night, everybody.